Hello everybody and welcome back to Tartarian Tales number 88. This is artofdino.com and saveearth.us, and this is a very cool one from an article, the New York Herald, April 2nd, 1922, called "The Lost Treasures of Ancient Khans Reappear." So, very curious as to where these ended up, but curious in general just to know about these lost treasures. So that's what we're going to find out about. This is a short little four column article, and I'll include some arts as well, mostly probably AI, but then I'll try to find some photos, see if I can dig up any of these treasures on the internet or anything. But either way, enjoy the imagery, and I'll chime in from time to time as we figure out about these lost treasures of ancient Khans, because think about it. These guys were traveling the world, conquering the world. Every time they'd take a place, they'd sack all the loot, all the treasure, all this stuff, and then they'd probably put it in some kind of sacred place. And I'm sure they were smart enough to hide it in a place where people weren't able to find it, or invading forces weren't able to find it. That's what you hear throughout a lot of time, as like even the Spanish came for the South Americans, they found places to hide their treasures. The Tibetans, I'm sure they have found plenty of places to hide their most sacred of treasures, because that's what you have to do when an invading force is coming at you and wanting to destroy you, and you know that. So hopefully they did, and there's probably so many more treasures underneath everything that I can't even fathom. But either way, they put out this one in an article, so these ones are known about, and they're most likely in the secure places of some kind of rich elite scum somewhere. But who knows? They could be under our feet somewhere. People could be they could be in museums. I don't know where they are, but let's find out here. Lost treasures of ancient Khans reappear. Out of India, there comes new evidence that legends of the treasures of the once omnipotent Khans of the Mongols are no myth. During the last few years, many large precious stones, including medieval turquoises from the Sur Darya, one of mid-Asia's great rivers, together with rare Asiatic ornaments and pieces of Tatar-worked gold, have been filtering into India from the northward, and it is certain these could only have been obtained in the tombs of the Khans, which have been lost to 10 or 5 centuries and more, lost and found to be lost again. Very interesting how they refer to it as Tatar worked gold. So that means that was probably a known industry of the Tatars, was gold. So, and again, they're not just nomads, so you got to scratch that completely. That's like the propaganda that they put out at a certain time, that these people were just nomads that conquered the whole world. No, they were so much more than that, and apparently now they were gold workers. So let's keep going. Some 18 years ago, a few pieces of Tatar work gold and a small quantity of quaintly cut precious stones were obtained in Bokhara by the Imperial Russian authorities from 2 men of Yarkand who had chanced upon the great Mongols' tombs. It is understood that these, in every respect of craftsmanship, resemble the singular rarities which have been coming out of the state of Nepal without any adequate source being ascribed to them. Again, the connection of Tatar, Nepal, Tibet, all those things is lost, and we got to bring it back because it's very important. Central and Southern Asia have innumerable traditions of lost treasures lying in the graves of forgotten emperors and kings, and hidden in the ruins of the lost cities, and under the desert sands, and in ancient and forsaken temples. Dear God, what could possibly be under the sands of the Sahara? To me, it looks like a greater, I always think of that as like a greater force, some giant forces, or whatever, etc., dumping a bunch of sand to cover up something, kind of like when someone pukes in our tiny realm, you throw sand on it and you get rid of it, you eliminate it, it kind of just sits there, no one really digs underneath it, it soaks up some of the stuff, and then if you were to dig it up again, you just scrape it clean, or you just you have to take the sand off, which is, when it's a city, it's a lot different. And if these beings that created these things, or people beyond the poles, were much bigger than us, it would be really easy to take large quantities of sand and just dump it onto these kind of places, like a giant sandbox is what I kind of picture it as. But who knows? Either way, there's treasures under all the sand and all the dirts, and that's what we need to think of. But greatest of all are these which tradition and story in Ferghanistan, Kashgar, and Turkestan have handed down, the treasures of the lost tombs of the Khans, of the Mongols or Tatars. They who ravaged Europe in the 13th century from Danzig in the north to the Adriatic in the south and the Rhine in the west. Their lootings impoverished Europe for more than a century. Their slaughtering, it has been roughly computed, involved some 35 million lives, Asiatic and European. And the hordes of the great Khans, Genghis Khan, Ogotai Khan, Mangu, Bati, and the others were successively laid with their dead bodies in the catacombs of the imperial family. Catacombs, imagine that. Those weren't just underground places that were scary back in the day. When the catacombs in all these cities were flourishing, there's no doubt they were probably a nice place to go into, filled with civilization and tech and all different kinds of things that made it, not just like a dark cave like we think of it today as scary and terrifying and could close in on you. I'm sure they were very elaborate and amazing and carved out beautifully, kind of like the salt mines of Ukraine and all over the place when they were in their prime. Again, the catacombs, and these guys are burying the Khans in them. You bet they're not just some shady dirt hole in the ground or tunnels. They're something amazing, probably resembling like the underground of New York City, all those elaborate brick structures that no one really talks about or really knows the true origins of. But again, here we go. What is established fact is the visit of the two men of Yarkand in Kashgar to the tombs. Their tale, as was set forth by Russian authorities in Bokhara, who took it down, reads like a chapter out of the Arabian Nights entertainment. The little suspect, but here we go. These two men belonged to a caravan trading from Yarkand to Churchin, on the river so-called, in the towns bordering the Lu Shah Desert in Turkestan. Not satisfied with their treatment, however, they left it at Khotan and set out by themselves to return to Yarkand. They lost their way among the mountain defiles, and after wandering for 3 days among the desolate gorges, found themselves following a narrow track hewn in the rock between beetling cliffs. After traversing the deep and gloomy defile for a considerable time, they came to a great cave with a number of huge images set in a row in front of its heavily sculptured portal. Dear God, that must have been amazing to stumble across something like that in the middle of nowhere. The feeling would just be unbelievable to know that you discovered something amazing. I'm so jealous of all these people that existed during this time of discovery. They continued, they entered and discovered a number of ancient tombs, and by every tomb lay innumerable objects of great value. They averred they saw more than sufficient precious stones alone than many camels could carry. They brought away all they dare burden themselves with, refilled their water skins, and retraced their steps, making careful observations as to the situation of the mouth of the rock-hewn path and the defile. I don't know what that word is. The defile, and left heaps of stones as a guide. Before they again picked up the regular caravan route to Yarkand, they had to throw away the greater part of their treasure trove to save their lives. So weakened had they become through privations. When they reached their native town, they had some little idea of the value of their discovery, and thinking to better themselves by it and realize a higher price for the precious articles, they proceeded to Bokhara by way of Kashgar, Osh, and Kodjend, keeping their tale to themselves and the jewels closely concealed. At a caravanserai in Bokhara, they came in contact with a noted English traveler and explorer in Middle Asia, Henry Spalding, to whom the so-called cradle of the human race from Bokhara to Kashgar was more familiar than the green and pleasant lanes of the country of his birth. Spalding coaxed their story out of them, and on examination of the jewels they had, and with their permission, brought them to the notice of the Russian authorities. To him the discovery appealed with irresistible force, and he had no trouble in arranging an expedition, though great difficulty was experienced in overcoming the fears of the two men and persuading them to act as guides. All Central Asia had been dreaming for centuries of the treasures in the lost tombs of the great Khans. The inner world of the Bokharan bazaars buzzed with the wildest stories of the immensity of riches now discovered. The matter appears to have been brooded in a certain strange underground, for the imperial officials warned Spalding that the expedition most certainly was going to its doom. However, it started. From subsequent inquiries made by the Russians, Spalding, it was ascertained, took for his route one of the old and now unused lines of travel much in use between China and mid-Asia during the ages of the Mongol Empire. It is a southern route by Kashgar and Khotan and goes through the desert to Lobnor and thence eastward to Shachao in the Great Wall of China, Tartaria. Whether Spalding and his men reached the lost tombs or not, no information is definitely forthcoming. Rumor in the bazaars of Samarkand, Bokhara, and Kashgar had it that he succeeded in getting to the Great Khan's resting place, secured some of the treasure, and set out to proceed to Nepal, where the expedition was murdered to a man. The imperial authorities, however, arrived at a different conclusion, that he and his men had died in the wilds of the Dapsang at the hands of trackers. But whatever the place of Spalding's disappearance, together with his expedition and however their doom came about, this is certain. Only since the intrepid Englishman and his men went beyond our knowledge have the Sur Daria turquoises and jewels of medieval mid-Asia and other regions, together with Tatar gold work, found their way southward out of Nepal and into India. It has been deducted that the treasure tombs of the Mongol emperors lie approximately 60 to 70 miles northeast of the Kashgar border, on the way from Yarkand to Khotan, deep amidst the rugged primeval mountains which have witnessed the beginning of things, and where the eagles and torrents alone make the defiles echo. The secret of mid-Asia remains a secure secret still. So after all of that, nothing. The lost treasures of the ancient Khans reappear and then disappear just like that. And that's, again, what happens when a government ends up inevitably finding out. These guys were great at keeping it very secretive for quite some time. And I'm sure they just wanted to scream from the things, oh, we found this treasure. They definitely should have planned this a little better and should have taken, I would have found a bunch of private people. I would have gone back on an expedition of my own, and I would have gradually taken and documented this stuff and brought it out some other way, some secretive way, because while it was still a secret, was the perfect time. Once the jig was up, there's no telling who, the Russians, the Europeans, anyone, the locals, who sent out in search of all these things, and then what they did with it after. Place could have been defiled in a couple of days and completely removed, even no matter how big it was. But either way, I still haven't heard anything of this place as of yet. And you'd think it would be something that was well known. If they were to ever find this actual tomb and catacombs that were filled with these Khans, you bet they would be documented in some way. And there'd be books on them, there'd be museums about them, unless the desire to keep their Tartarian Khan history lost is so strong that they would either destroy things or, again, keep them private in the hands of private collections, the elite, beyond the realm. Who knows? But most likely, these guys had treasures that would have redefined history and would have just required a complete revamping of history, because they probably had treasures from all over the world, maybe technology that was supposedly not existent, maybe some gifts from America that would incredibly throw their entire narrative out of the window, which is most likely possibly the case, because I think that these kings and these Khans were in America making substantial buildings in a substantial civilization at some point, and so some of that proof and evidence in books and whatever treasures could have been in these tombs, which is, again, more reason to keep them hidden from us. So again, they put out the tease in the newspaper to make people kind of go wild, make people's imaginations go nuts, even to this day right now. And then they the tease. Then you kind of know that whatever, they're somewhere else. A lot of people will probably go and think, oh, they were never found. But the people that know people that are kind of aware of how this world works will most likely assume that people in power stole them and have them and either melted them down or are still preserving them somewhere in the annals of a zone that is where our true history lies, instead of the dump pile that they give us to chime over and learn about, which is probably nothing like the actual history, which makes us filled with potential, all kinds of great powers where we came from, and most likely talks about the giants and other amazing races beyond the poles. All that stuff they keep hidden from us was probably depicted in some form in the lost treasures of the ancient Khans, which remain lost. Supposedly. So either way, again, a lot of thoughts, a lot of theory, a lot of everything like that. So I hope you enjoyed this video, hope you enjoyed the imagery, and I hope this made you think. And if anyone out there knows, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe these are in a museum somewhere in Turkestan or one of those stands. It could very well be the case. So if it is, let me know. I'd love to see it. And if you can find any pictures, put some links in the comments, because something must have been let out. But again, who knows? So, bless you all. Check out artofdino.com. Check out Save Earth. And thanks again for checking out Tartarian Tales 88.